thank you all very much for coming. I'm pleased to note that we have a successful seminar, because the definition of a successful seminar is more participants than chairs. And so we have achieved that, which is excellent. So thank you all very much for coming and supporting this. Thanks very much to the exhibitors who are here supporting this. It's a first. It's always very hard to get out and actually be the first. That goes for the exhibitors and the speakers. And we have a big first today. What was it, the year before last, I think? A company moved into a big shed down the corner of ours, and for quite a while there was no signage on it. You think, what on earth are these guys going to do? Oh, another distribution business, no doubt, because it's a very nice big shed, which I would have liked, but didn't get to it. So Matt's business has moved into that shed, and I will pass over to Matt and let him talk to you about what they're doing.
Thank you. I'm mic'd up. Thank you, Bruce, and thank you, Freya, for the invitation. I, right about now, would be clicking onto my first slide, but we have had technical issues, and we don't have a slide show for you, which is okay, because usually they're just a prop, so we'll wing it. But thank you for the invitation. I'd like to pay my respects to the traditional owners, their ancestors, past and emerging. So I'd like to thank the Darkinjung, and I really mean that, because I think the Darkinjung probably one of the best land councils in the country, and I think they have a real significant role to play on the Central Coast journey through sustainable energy. Bit about us as a company. Star Scientific is not a startup. Star Scientific has been around for 30 years in one form or another. It was founded by Stephen Horvath, who is the father of the current CEO and chairman, Andrew Horvath. This is our second coming to the Central Coast. I'd also like to introduce Shane DeCourcy, who's our Deputy CEO and Operations Manager. So if you've got any questions about the building or whatever, he's the guy. Our first journey on the Central Coast was down at Mans Road, Shane. We had our lab there. Then we moved up to Mayfield West to the Steel River estate, and at the start of this year we came back, took over the old Crone site because we needed more space. We're a private company. We are funded by private investors, a lot of them just mums and dads investors, ranging right through to the divest invest market, which is massive globally. Our core business is energy, and recently our core business is around hydrogen. I'll talk a little bit about hydrogen, and then talk a little bit about our core technology, and then talk about what I think it means for the Central Coast. One of the things I've learnt in my time as a spin doctor is never assume that people have the same knowledge that you have. Now, I don't have a lot of knowledge about hydrogen, but I'll try and explain in layman's terms what hydrogen is and what some of the significant issues are. The main thing about hydrogen is that it is a great source of energy, and it is the most abundant element in the universe. But there are a couple of problems associated with it. One is how you extract it, how you actually get the hydrogen to use, and secondly is how you actually use it. Why? Because hydrogen, in layman's terms, it doesn't give you as big a bang for buck in an energy sense as other forms of gases. You need more of it, and it's lighter than a lot of other gases as well, which is why once upon a time it was used for airships. Hydrogen is incredibly hot right now, which is a deliberate pun. People are right into it. Every time you look at a website or look at a paper, there's some politician or some lobbyist talking about hydrogen. So it's a very exciting place to be at the moment. One of the things you will see is hydrogen associated with different colours, full colours of the rainbow. But the three key colours are brown, blue, and green. Most hydrogen today is made as brown hydrogen or blue hydrogen, which means either coal or gas is heated up to create another gas, which is then split into hydrogen and carbon dioxide. Something needs to be done with that carbon dioxide, and this is where carbon capture and storage comes in. to the story. Now, you may have your views on carbon capture and storage. I have personal views. I don't think it's really a thing, but a lot of other people do. The real star of this story is what is known as green hydrogen. Now, to produce hydrogen, you need another form of energy. And the form of energy that green hydrogen uses is electricity, and that electricity can be generated from wind, from solar, or from pumped hydro. It then goes through a nifty machine called an electrolyser. An electrolyser takes water and splits it into its constituent parts, which is H2O, hydrogen and oxygen. The oxygen can be used or vented into the atmosphere. The hydrogen then is stored. That's a really important story because you will know, the people who have been following it, that during certain times of the day or even the year, we have some issues with solar in particular, but also wind, in that at times we produce too much of it for the grid and it gets spilled. We hope that the hydrogen sector is giving these forms of sustainable energy another business model, which is to turn it into hydrogen to be used later on. So just going on from the previous speech, hydrogen in some ways is another form of battery without all the wires. So hydrogen has these issues. The other issues are around supply side issues. They are around the transportation of it, the storage of it. Again, how you create it as well. You can store it as a compressed gas, you can store it as a liquid, you can convert it into ammonia for use, but it's still problematic. The scale of hydrogen that we want for our purposes is far greater than a lot of the storage solutions and transport solutions that are available now. In some ways, the announcement by the Prime Minister a couple of days ago on linking up the gas networks, it's cropped a lot of criticism for that, but in some ways that's a good thing for hydrogen because you can transport hydrogen through existing gas pipelines, or at least modern existing gas pipelines. These are all supply side issues, and at Star Scientific, our view is that you create a market, create a demand for hydrogen, the supply side issues will look after themselves, and there is some amazing innovation going on in storage, transportation, and in electrolysers as well. The other big issue is how you use hydrogen. That is the other big missing part of the picture. The way hydrogen is used presently, it's either introduced into gas and used for industrial purposes with gas, which is great. You can blend about 10% of it with gas, but again, you're still creating carbon dioxide because you're using the gas. You can burn hydrogen, but it's not really efficient, and it puts in danger some existing infrastructure. It embrittles it. You can turn it, as I said earlier, into ammonia, use it for industrial feedstocks and for other purposes. You can use fuel cells, which is where vehicles come in, but fuel cells have limitations as you expand the size and need of the usage. This is where we come in. I'd love to show you a terrific example of Hero, but I can't. It is on our YouTube page and on our website as well. So about 4 or 5 years ago, the scientists were working on another experiment in the energy space when they encountered a problem, what they saw as a problem. An experiment kept going wrong. This thing kept randomly heating up, and they scratched their heads and treated it as I said, as a problem. Then all of a sudden, like many great inventions, they realised that by accident they'd made this profound discovery. And that profound discovery is what we call HERO, the Hydrogen Energy Release Optimizer, which is basically a paste, right? A secret paste. It's so secret that even I don't know the details of it, and I prefer to keep it that way. The thing about HERO is that it is not only a catalyst, it is what is known as a true catalyst, which means it doesn't get consumed during the process during the catalytic process. So there is no combustion. So what you would be seeing now is a little unit called a coffee pot. There is a little piece of HERO in the middle of it, put in hydrogen, put in oxygen, and the thing, in layman's terms, glows. We can create up to 800 degrees Celsius within 3 minutes and then turn it off, and the thing is still sitting there inert. The only output is heat and water, pure water. All right, it's unique. It's been patented around the globe, has no competitors. The head of the School of Chemistry at the University of Newcastle has signed it off. It's a thing. We're scaling it up at the moment. The issues are around what you actually put this paste on, which is known as a substrate, and we're experimenting with metals, ceramics, and some other space-age materials that I can't describe. So the hydrogen, the HERO delivery system potentially goes in two significant ways, two significant business models. The first, using the sustainable energy through the electrolyser, we create hydrogen. We can then export the hydrogen or use it domestically. But the real magic comes when you apply it to a HERO unit. And that magic manifests itself in two ways. Around the world at the moment, the markets are panicking. The energy markets are panicking. And they're panicking because a think tank called Cambridge Econometrics has calculated that there is potentially US 1 trillion to 4 trillion of stranded assets globally as we move through the transition. Okay? 1 to 4 power stations that are coal-fired power stations and their associated infrastructure. Because people are saying, well, we close that down, we'll do this other thing with sustainable energy. What we say is a lot of those assets do not have to be stranded. They can have a new life. We can turn your turbines using green hydrogen through a HERO unit. And what's more, you can decommission a lot of that expensive infrastructure you have at that power station. You don't need the coal input. You don't need the pollution control because you're not creating any pollution. And we're currently studying a power station not too far from here. We're looking closely at one in Hamburg in Germany called Moorburg, a huge power station that is 5 years old. Only 5 years old, coal-fired power station. Germany's going through this massive transition at the moment, as is the whole of Europe, but Germany in particular, and they want to close down a lot of their coal-fired power stations. And we hope to have some exciting news in Southeast Asia very soon. So that's one business model. Let's keep these huge, big power stations, potentially steel mills and other major parts of industry ticking over, but let's not do it with the coal or gas, let's do it with hydrogen. The second business area for us is that the beauty of HERO is not only do you scale it up, can you scale it up, you can also scale it down, all right, to create bespoke power sources for remote and regional uses, and we've got plenty of those here in Australia, whether they are ore bodies that haven't been mined because you can't get power to them, or remote regional communities on the Australian mainland, in the Antarctic area potentially. But think about our region. Think about Indonesia. Think about the Philippines that are made up of thousands of islands that are held back from their sustainable economic development because they're relying on diesel generators, all right? And they may have one power plug per hut. Interestingly, water is also a problem. The storage of water on these islands is also a problem. Their whole economic development is being held back for want of power, and we believe that with HERO units, we can scale down. Now, there's another really interesting development. There's so much great innovation and science happening globally. GE, the company GE, used to be General Electric, and others are developing a new form of turbine called a supercritical CO2 turbine. Now, don't worry about the term CO2. We're talking about a closed unit here. But if you heat CO2 right up, it turns into a part gas, part liquid, and they've used this process to create turbines to power a basic suburb of 40,000 homes. A turbine would fit on your kitchen table. A CO2 turbine would fit on your kitchen table. All right? Now, there's early stages of development, like HERO was sort of developing in parallel. And what that means is we can go off the grid, whether it's here or anywhere else around the world. I should say that Star Scientific, we have a range of subsidiaries. We're based here in Australia, but also in Germany or in Zurich in Switzerland. And as I said, Southeast Asia, hopefully very soon. So this is a really exciting picture, and it's all happening, all that research and development is happening 2 doors down on the corner at Crane. You drove past it when you came here this morning. Let's bring the picture back a little bit locally. As I said earlier, it's a really exciting time to be involved in hydrogen, and to give them their credit, a lot of that momentum is being driven by governments. I'd have another great slide up there with all of the policies. We have a federal hydrogen strategy. Every state and territory has a hydrogen strategy. In fact, my slide was somewhat redundant, even though it was only 2 weeks old, because they're all changing, all developing their hydrogen strategies. That's a bit of an issue. You know, we're breaking down into states, a state-by-state thing. We want the states to cooperate and take a bigger global picture. The other weakness on some of these strategies is it's still focused on export. Look, you know, that's great, but let's not go down that age-old Australian model of creating a cheap commodity which we export offshore for other people to make money out of. Let's use it here. But there is a huge export market for us. But it's not just about the raw material, it's about the components. Let's manufacture the components in the hydrogen supply chain. Let's manufacture electrolyzers here. We're going to manufacture hero units here. Let's export our smarts, our consulting, our technology, our data, all around the hydrogen supply chain. And we can do that. And in fact, just recently, the federal government announced a major research initiative with Germany. Germany is really driving the industrial use of hydrogen. So we can be involved in the whole supply chain. Tasmania has a very interesting policy. Tasmania's policy is based on it's very ironic because my personal story, I got involved in politics 1983, I was doing my HSC, and those of you who are old enough will remember 1983 was the year of the Franklin Dam debate, which politicised me. Weirdly, instead of going to the left, I went into the Liberal Party to try and change it from within. I know, but we had some successes, and now we have a Liberal government in Tasmania lauding its own sustainable energy policies because it's got all this hydro energy. It's bizarre. But they have a very interesting, very exciting hydrogen policy down there. The Victorians are slowly catching up. New South Wales, you saw some announcements by Matt Keane the other day. Queenslanders have a great hydrogen policy centred on Gladstone and the industrial use and export of Gladstone. West Australians, being West Australians, are doing their own thing, but it's pretty exciting what they're doing over there. And the South Australians in the Northern Territory, they want to go into export of energy in a big way. Northern Territory is interesting. We've got the Sun Cable proposal up there, which is former client of mine, Mike Cannon-Brooks, has invested a lot of money into that. The idea there is that they'll generate a lot of energy from massive solar farms and have a cable plugged into Singapore. We'll see if that works. Our bet is on hydrogen, but if theirs fails, they can make hydrogen for us. So we've got all this policy being driven by governments around Australia. Governments are actually ahead of the curve on this in Australia, which is really, really exciting. Labor, Liberal, doesn't matter. And that's really exciting. There are some common themes in policy, and I've mentioned some of them already. The other really important one is regulation and standards. We actually have to get a national head around what is hydrogen, what makes up hydrogen, how do we handle it. Safety is really important, obviously. The terrible incident the other day in Beirut, I know we're talking about a different chemical, but it was a real jolt to the whole system, which says if we want to bring Australia with us on hydrogen, we've got to get safety issues right. So we've got to bring the community along with us. And then there's policies around innovation, around removing the barriers of entry, about removing subsidies for other forms of energy and putting them into hydrogen and some other exciting areas of fuel. So governments are leading that, and that's wonderful. What does it mean for us here? What does it mean for us here? We have some really exciting conditions here that leads us to believe that we think little old Central Coast can play a global role in the hydrogen revolution. And the elements are these. Firstly, there is support for what we are doing across 3 levels of government. I've talked about the federal government, and they referenced, okay, now this is an important point. They referenced the Hunter the other day, as did Matt Keane the other day. Now, I'm only new to the Central Coast. I've only been living here for 20 years. And I am over they're the Hunter and we're the Central Coast thing. And I include Lake Macquarie in that. We're all in this together as a large region, okay? But all governments have come out, the state and federal governments have come out and said, we want the Hunter to play a role. And some of them also mention the Central Coast. The council is doing a great job. Central Coast Council, I think the amalgamation has been successful. The council officers have in their, I'm not stealing their thunder, but in their economic plan, there is sustainable energy as part of our economic growth. So all 3 governments are on board and they're all talking to each other. So that's one of the really important factors we've got. In terms of a market, a domestic market, we have the Hunter Valley on our doorstep, who are going through this amazing transition. You know, I used to go to all these conferences up there 5 years ago, and all I could talk about was coal. And then overnight, they're starting to talk about the transition to new forms of sustainable energy, which is really exciting. We've got this market just on our doorstep. And the other key element, I think, is interestingly, in a strategic sense, and again, quite ironically, you know, there's a coal mine allegedly going to be starting just up the road, who are building a siding onto the main Northern Rail line. And it would be quite ironic, but I think that could be a very important strategic piece of infrastructure for sustainable development, for the development of sustainable energy here on the Central Coast. And the other thing, of course, is our lifestyle. I mean, you're a young scientist and we've got 5 or 6 of them down the road. Your choice is, you might come out of Sydney or you might come out of Newcastle. Your choice is Gladstone or Terrigal. You know, it's the quality of life, and all our guys love living and working here. Some of them still commute from the Hunter. So you package all those things up, and it's an exciting cocktail and an exciting recipe for the development of hydrogen here on the Central Coast. I had a slide where I thought what parts of hydrogen and sustainable energy we could do. Research and development, yes, absolutely number 1. That's why we're here, for all the reasons that I've mentioned so far. So research, manufacturing, yes. You know, we on the Central Coast, Hunter of course, but the Central Coast, we sometimes don't talk up enough our capacity for manufacturing here as well. So yes, we can research and develop hydrogen. Yes, we can manufacture parts of the components, and when Corays or whatever they're called now build that siding up the road, we can export it to the world. Production of hydrogen, not so much. You know, you need a fair bit of land for solar. You need community consent for wind turbines, whether it's terrestrial or whether it's offshore. Again, I think the export thing is a little bit overdone. There's plenty of evidence which says hydrogen will be generated close to its use, the people who are using it. And there are some incredible advances, particularly in floating wind turbines. That means that the export thing might be a little bit overdone. We will have to produce some of it here. just for our own research and development purposes. But I don't think you're going to see massive solar farms on this end of that region. Whether or not we use it to provide energy for our own businesses, for businesses like this, yes, but probably not in the way that you think. We think that using hydrogen via hero systems, we can green the grid. Therefore, the power coming through your sockets here will be green. You don't necessarily need to have a bespoke off-the-grid energy system. And mobility, it might surprise you. I'm not here to talk about hydrogen-fueled cars or trucks, and that might surprise you. But again, we think we can green the grid. So, at least from a consumer's perspective, EVs maybe, I hate TLAs, three-letter acronyms. Electric vehicles is probably the way to go. Yes, hydrogen maybe for buses, for trucks and other forms of transport. But if I was having a bet, hydrogen cars for individuals, EVs, I'd probably go electrical. So look, hopefully I've given you an overview of what hydrogen is, what are the issues surrounding it, what we do, what is the value add at Star Scientific, and what the future holds for us. We're really proud of it. Look, can I tell you, we field, and some of you would know, we field calls from all over the world, 24 hours a day. Come to us, move out of Australia. We're staying here, all right? Not only are we staying here, we're staying here, Star Scientific. Yeah, some of our manufacturing and servicing might be at different parts around the country, but this is where we live. So I was delighted, Bruce and Freya, to invite us along and to tell you about what's happening in that factory just down the road. Thank you.